Hello, I am Charlotte and this is my channel. Hello. I have a 2025 TBR sort of thing that I'm doing at the moment. I've got a list of 18 books that I put into groups of 3s and I'm trying to read as sort of grouped together. And the next book on the list is actually Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix, and I'm very excited to read this book. Grady Hendrix had another book come out this year, Witchcraft for Wayward girls. And you know, it's pretty rare that a book is released in Australia at the same time as the US. So I actually managed to get my hands on this one in, you know, a timely fashion, which is very rare. And hey, it matches my shirt. That's very fun. And I was thinking, you know, I'm excited to read Horrorstör. I want to read this. So, like, soon I want to be part of the zeitgeist for once in my life. And I was like, well, that's 2 Grady Hendrix books that I want to read in fairly quick succession. Why not add a 3rd book? So here I've got the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which is just another one I picked up that I haven't gotten to yet. And, you know, I don't often read the same author like in a row. Like I have my Stephen Kings, and you know, in 2016-17 I was probably only really reading Stephen Kings, but that was like one every couple of months. I wasn't getting through them quickly at all. And you know, I'm not saying that I'm gonna get through these Grady Hendrix ones quickly at all, but I thought it would be a fun little challenge for me to do, to read my 3 Grady Hendrix books in a row and see if that's fun for me. Yeah. I'm hoping to give some updates along the way. This will be a different sort of way of filming for me, but I'm really excited to try this out. And the first book I will read will be Horrorstör, which is about a scary IKEA. Something strange is happening at the Orsk Furniture Store in Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah, so it's like horror IKEA. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this one. Hello! Alright, so I finished Horrorstör last night and the bastard made me cry. First things first, I'd hoped to have given an update halfway through, you know, made some food and talked about the book at the halfway point. I'd even made some notes, but unfortunately I'd been a bit sick this week, so I just didn't want to hop on camera. So in this book we're following Amy, who works at a furniture store called Orsk. She doesn't really like her job very much, and she's just very much there for the paycheck. And it's, you know, not that well paying. She still has problems with paying her rent on time and things like that. Her manager is a guy called Basil. It's a typical manager, just very on Amy about her work and, you know, what she's doing at any given time. And Amy really doesn't like Basil. And he's a bit younger than her, but, you know, quite ambitious, it seems. Weird things are happening in the night, and the morning staff are coming in to Orsk to find, you know, things broken, and, you know, things dirty. So it seems to have been going on for a while, the weird stuff in the night, and Basil, as the manager, decides that he wants to get a couple of people together to stay in the evening and figure out what's going on in the store. But everybody's too busy, so the people that he gets are Amy and Ruth Ann, who is an older woman who's worked at Orsk for a very, very long time, and, you know, is very good at her job. They stay behind at night and things start to get weird and scary. They also bump into 2 other of their colleagues, Matt and Trinity, who are there because they believe the place is haunted and are trying to film a ghost show and get a ghost show launched. And then everything sort of kicks off, and that's the bulk of the book. I've heard a few people say that, you know, this book is all action essentially when it starts, and I think that's fair to say. I think it is very, very, very action-packed, but it made me cry, so there is an emotional through line that at least, you know, hits me. So we find out that Orsk was built on what used to be a jail, and they refer to that as a panopticon. The Cuyahoga panopticon, I think is what they call it. Yeah, Cuyahoga panopticon. And they call it the Cuyahoga panopticon. Which I thought was interesting, because the panopticon was a concept for a jail from Jeremy Bentham that was about having sort of like a fully round jail in which the guards could sit in the middle and be able to turn and look at anyone at any one time. You would never know if you were being watched or not. But even the jails that were built with the panopticon in mind, I don't think they ever actually called themselves panopticons. Anyway, it's not important. I thought that was interesting. I thought it was interesting to call it the panopticon because Jeremy Bentham had his ideas to create the panopticon and how surveilling people would better society, yada 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 bullshit. Foucault went on to develop the panopticon theory of surveillance and stuff like that, which I think surveillance as a theme in a book about, you know, a workplace, I think is really cool. You know, theories around making people disorientated in shopping centers and malls, and, you know, no light, and having certain things in certain places, and this, that, and the other will make people stay longer, or this, that, and the other will make people spend more money. So I think the idea of recontextualizing this place that was built on the surveillance of prisoners and the mistreatment of prisoners to a shop, like through the lens of capitalism, people are psychologically played with until they spend enough money in the shop. I think it's a really interesting idea. I was so surprised that I started crying over this book, and I sent a video to my friend. I think I'm just too tired, but I just finished a book about evil IKEA and it made me so sad. It's evil IKEA, why am I crying? I think just what really got to me was like little things that remind you of a person that really hit home. I think it's because, you know, something little about a person, like a minute detail about a person, is what really makes them seem like a person. And so to have this element in the book that I felt was like small and in the context of grief, I just fucking lost my mind. That set me off, and I was just crying the whole time as I was like finishing off the book. Where there's a whole bunch of names and it's essentially some graffiti in a bathroom, but you know, it means more later. But one of the names that's written here, and you can see it in the book, is Traveling Jack. And Traveling Jack is what they call Jack in The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub, which I read at the start of this year. It was fun for me because I read that one recently. I ended up really loving this book. I was really surprised that it got to me as much as it did. You know, I was really tired when I finished it off, so maybe I can say it was that. I think there's just this idea of, you know, having to work a job that you don't really like, and all to just keep food on the table and everything, and you know, just being a cog in the machine. She gets put in this really dangerous position. It's just something about having to go through you're having to go through whatever trauma in the workplace and then having to engage with like a corporate team after. Just that's the real horror. Having a job is the real horror. Having to engage with managers and bosses, that's the real horror. I did forget to say in my intro to this video that this isn't the first Grady Hendrix book that I've read. I've also read My Best Friend's Exorcism. I read that one in 2023. I really, really liked that one. What I've noticed so far in the 2 Grady Hendrix books that I've read, that there seems to be this theme around supernatural trauma and whoever you went through that experience with being the only person who will believe you. Really just showing this idea of trauma is really isolating. And I think that really adds to the horror of it all. Again, reading My Best Friend's Exorcism, that was so hee hee hee, I'm having so much fun, hee hee hee. Oh, which was a really similar feeling with Horrorstör. It's like hee hee hee, so silly, I can't believe it's an evil IKEA. And then I'm crying, then I'm crying. Well, first I'm reading it, I'm having so much fun, then I'm like, oh, this is a bit scary, and then I'm like, oh, that's freaking so gross, that's really yucky, and then I'm like bawling my eyes out. So I really went through the gamut of emotions for this one. I think there was a really similar theme in these books of like, maybe just trauma generally, but in these books, supernatural trauma, going through that experience, and whoever else went through that experience with you is the only person who's going to believe you, making everything really insular and isolating. I think it's, you know, a very real theme, but a very sad one as well, and I'm interested to see if it comes through in the other 2 Grady Hendrix books that I'm going to be reading for this little challenge that I've set myself. So I rate Horrorstör 4 stars. Really, really loved it. Really, really suggest it to anyone who hates their job. Anyone who hates IKEA, anyone who's scared of IKEA, anyone who's really interested in like form, I suppose, because, you know, it's really cool that this is set up like a catalogue. I think, you know, it's really engaging to be able to look at everything that's just sort of included in here. And, you know, like the format of the book not being just like your standard book, like being a different shape, being a bit heavier, having, you know, having a map in it, having the graffiti in it, being a catalogue. I think that's really cool. The next book of the 3 that I'm going to read is going to be The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I know a little bit about this group of, you know, women in a book club who have to deal with a vampire. Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her husband is a workaholic, her teenage kids have their own lives, her senile mother-in-law needs constant care, and she's always a step behind on her endless to-do list. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, a close-knit group of Charleston women united by their love of true crime. Then James Harris walks into their lives during the summer of 1993. He makes her feel things she hasn't felt in years, but when children on the other side of town go missing, Patricia wonders if he's connected. Is he Brad Pitt, a Bundy, or something much worse? That's fun. I didn't realise it was 1993. Another one set in the past, like My Best Friend's Exorcism, so that should be a bit of fun. I'm really excited to get started. So here we go. So tired. It is the end of my workday. I'm in a really hot room. I look kind of crazy, but I figure I better tell you what I thought of this book so I can move on to my next book tonight. So yesterday my work had a technical outage and I was not able to work, but I had to sort of stick around on standby. Because I was waiting around all day, I decided to pick my book up and get reading. Before yesterday, I had read about 90 pages of this, and I didn't really have many thoughts at that point. It was just sort of that, you know, character introductions were taking quite a long time, and I felt like it was a little bit slow, so that didn't happen, and I'm having a very good time. But I was so engrossed, and I still just kept not having work, so I kept reading until work told me that the problem wasn't going to be fixed yesterday and I could log off. And then after that I continued to read some more, popped this down, had some dinner and watched some TV, and finished this before bed. This is like a 400-page book and I finished it in 2 days, I think that would have been. I'm not usually able to read something quite that many pages in that short of a time. So I think that's a testament to how much I really enjoyed this book. So the story is about these 5 women who have a book club where they mostly read sort of true crime books, some mixed in some other ones as well, but predominantly true crime. Main perspective we get is from Patricia, and she essentially says to these women that, you know, she's quite bored with her life and wouldn't it be cool if a crime happened where they were living. Little does she know that a stranger is about to move into town. The name of the other women in the group, oh, I can do this. So it's Patricia, Grace, Kitty, Slick, and Mary Ellen. A lot of these characters have crazy names. I can't even remember if there was an explanation to why there is a woman called Slick. Well, let's see if I can do their husbands. Slick is married to Leland, Patricia is married to Carter, Kitty is married to Horse, Grace is married to Bennett, and Mary Ellen is married to Ed. If I could do all the children, if I could name all the children, I would. Let's see. Patricia and Carter have Blue and Corey. Corey's their oldest girl. Blue is Carter Jr., but they call him Blue. I don't know. That's only the start to the weird names. Don't think I can remember Grace's children or Slick's children. I know that Kitty has Pony, because he's essentially Horse Jr. I thought that was very funny. She's also got Honey, Merritt, Parrish, and Lacey. Oh, that's good. This isn't interesting. This isn't interesting. Me just showing off what names I remember in the book. Strange things start to happen when a stranger called James Harris moves into town. He's supposedly there to be helping out his sick great aunt, who is the neighbour of Patricia. One night when Patricia invites James Harris into her home, which she starts doing on the regular because she's very intrigued by him and a bit lonely at home. Her mother-in-law, who's staying with them as she's got dementia, gets very upset seeing James Harris. This sort of starts off a whole bunch of other stuff. Patricia starts getting weird vibes from James Harris and ends up talking to her mother-in-law's nurse, Mrs. Green. Mrs. Green lives in 6 Mile, which is a predominantly black neighbourhood in Charleston, and she tells Patricia about some deaths and disappearances in the area that, you know, very much freaks Patricia out. I feel like any more might be a bit of a spoiler. Grady Hendrix is a big horror guy, so him doing a vampire book, he's got his horror knowledge. There's a whole section where Patricia goes out and buys a whole bunch of vampire novels. It feels like a bit of a way for him to flex the horror knowledge, but as I thought it was fun in Horrorstör when I found the name Traveling Jack, which is a Stephen King character, when it was mentioned that Corey, Patricia's daughter, was reading Salem's Lot. I thought that was very fun because I feel like, you know, the stranger coming to town and essentially taking over the town is very Salem's Lot. I think even in at the end he's even done a group reading guide, which is very fun for like a book club. One of the questions is, discuss the novel in terms of other vampire horror fiction. What elements of vampire lore has Grady Hendrix expanded on, discarded, and added to the genre? Do you think he has successfully furthered readers' expectations for the vampire novel? You know, that's fun. I liked what I recognise more as references to Nosferatu than I saw to Dracula. So I've not seen the very original silent film Nosferatu, but I've seen the Werner Herzog Nosferatu and the latest Nosferatu. I really liked the Werner Herzog one, but a theme that is very present in Nosferatu is rats and like rat plague, and so I thought it was really cool that the way that was done in this was with the marsh rats. That was gross and cool and swampy. So I thought that was really exciting. That scene with the marsh rats, oh my god, that was something else. This book I found really effective. Like, it made me so angry and so scared. Like, I felt like how trapped the women were in their situations, in their relationships. It was just so palpable to me. Like, it really felt intense, and I was having really intense feelings, and I was having to put down the book for a couple of minutes to just like stop seething. I'd read a 1-star review on Goodreads for this book after I finished, and you know, that's on me. But the person was complaining about this book being like sexist and racist, and it was just really interesting to me because I felt like the book was portraying sexism and racism rather than being sexist and racist. I think you can really see the character of James Harris as an embodiment of a sort of colonial patriarchy. Like, he moves into a town and takes over. He assaults everyone in his path, essentially, in different ways. Like, his existence is an assault on people. I think you can really see him coming in and sucking places dry as a sort of colonial thing, right? Like, he comes in, he's got money that he can put in, and absolutely instills himself as something powerful there. Powerful and completely destructive. Like, what is investing in, it's like a real estate development that is slowly picking off parts of 6 Mile. Every aspect of this character, he's looking to dominate. I think the idea that, you know, these 5 women only have their house and their family and their book club is not a sexist idea. I think it's women in situations that they don't have a lot of control over making the best of it. You know, this horror of being a housewife, essentially, and not being able to get out of these situations. And like, this is set in the 80s and 90s, yet it still really feels like escaping these relationships is just impossible for these women, which, you know, James Harris really preys on. So it's really quite odd to me reading this review that's like, all these women care about are these superficial things. It's like, I think that's a really unfair way to view female characters. Like, women can enjoy anything, and especially when they've got confines around them, it's like, well, what do you want them to like? Like, they're trying to break out of these confines that they have, then the men in the book try to take that away from them. Like, I don't know how you see from that perspective, I guess. And as for it being racist, I mean, I don't know if I'm the right person to talk about it, right? But, you know, I have some thoughts. So the person was talking about how there was a white savior complex to this book, which I don't agree. The people who want to be saviors in this book can't. Like, they're trying, but they're stopped by whatever it is, by not wanting to do something, by their husbands, by James Harris himself, by whatever situation, by not having enough power behind them. They're not able to be the saviors that they want to be, and, you know, they can seriously be criticized for not being these saviors that they want to be, whilst also you have empathy for them for not being able to fully realize what they want to do. Like Patricia's whole arc is just insane. Like, she really wants to help, but everything is against her. I think the character of Miss Green is really good at calling out these characters for not living up to promises, for benefiting from the harm that's come to the children in 6 Mile. And, you know, ultimately the decimation of 6 Mile. I think that character really calls out the hypocrisy of these people who wanted to be saviors in the first place. I feel like if anyone is a savior in this book, it's Mrs. Green. She's doing what she can and where to keep her community safe, and she's calling out the bullshit of the women in the book club. So I think it's really odd to think of this as a white savior narrative, but I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. What I wanted to say in regards to James Harris as a character that really embodies domination and assault. There, you can sort of imagine that there is an element of that that's going to come through in an intense scene in the book via assault, right? And, you know, it's an upsetting scene, absolutely, but I think it really does encapsulate this character. He's done everything else at this point, why wouldn't he do that as well? And I think that's the culmination. I think that's the culmination of misogyny. I think that's, you know, misogyny taken to the nth degree, right? Because that one comment I read was, you know, critical of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being critical of men writing assault scenes. I think it's always good to have a critical eye when it comes to stuff like that, but I feel like it was appropriate for the book, and it was intense and it was horrible. But I think for the most part, everything that happened felt proportionate to the monster that was being portrayed. I don't know what's up with like the marketing and the titling of these books, like, because the covers are quite cute. I don't have Horrorstör here, I lent it to a friend already, but like that's one that looks very campy, fun, you know, with a cool gimmick, and you know, it was intense as hell and made me cry. And then, you know, this one's all cute with like peaches, and it's called The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Like, that sounds so campy. What happens in his books is so intense. Like, I think you do start off maybe more campy and more like, hee hee hee, I'm having a silly fun time. And then it's like, oh, you're gonna take it there? Oh, you're gonna take it there. Which isn't a criticism, but it is really like, it's weird going into these books expecting one thing and getting something else. But for me, that works. For other people, I don't know if it would always work. I'm always impressed with how taken aback I am by where these books go. Like, they get intense, they get existential, they get so scary to me. I genuinely find these books really scary, and I feel like that might even be not a popular opinion, but I find them really scary. Like, they really get to me, in a positive way. In a positive way. They're also really gross. There's some really gross bits. But like I said, with, you know, having read My Best Friend's Exorcism to Horrorstör, that there was this idea of a sort of communal trauma and maybe not really being believed other than by the people that share that communal trauma. I feel like that's quite similar in here, but even to the extent that all these women are pretty much facing very personal sort of traumas alone, as well as these group traumas, these communal traumas. And they even to a more extent having to face these traumas alone and trying to get people to believe them. Huge theme at how each woman decides to sort of engage with their friends' problems is really interesting. Again, I think there is a lot of horror in, especially in this one, about not being believed. Like, those are some of the most upsetting parts of the book, when people are just trying to be believed. So yeah, I really loved this book. When I first started, I wasn't sure how it was gonna go, and then I read 320 pages in a day. I liked it so much. I'm rating this a 4, I think. Bouncing between 4.5 and 4, but yeah, it was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this book, and it's made me really excited to continue on to the next one. The newest Grady Hendrix book. This came out recently and I was really surprised that I was able to get my hands on it, because I think, as I said in the intro, in Australia we just have to wait for stuff. Like, we don't get things the same time America does. They call them the Wayward girls, loose girls, girls who grew up too fast. They're sent to Wellwood House in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to give birth in secret and then put their babies up for adoption. 15-year-old Fern arrives at the home in the sweltering summer of 1970, pregnant, terrified, and alone. There she meets a dozen other girls in the same predicament. Rose, a hippie who insists she's going to keep her baby and escape to a commune. Zinnia, a budding musician who plans to marry her baby's father, and Holly, barely 14, mute and pregnant by no one knows who. Every moment of their waking day is strictly controlled by adults who claim to know what's best for them, until Fern meets a librarian who gives her an occult book about witchcraft. And suddenly, power is in the hands of the girls for the first time in their lives. But power is never given freely. There's always a price to be paid, and it is usually paid in blood. Cool! So I guess I want to just quickly say what I expect from this book. I know that Horrorstör was released 2014. This seems to have been published in 2020. So that's a 6-year difference. With, I think there were a couple of other books published in between those. And then this one is 2025, so that's, oh, okay, well that's a similar amount of time difference. 6 years, 5 years, okay. Because I figured maybe if I'd had books that were close together in publication order, they might be a bit more similar. But what I expect to see, what I expect to read in here is communal trauma. As I keep saying, I think personal and communal trauma will be a pretty big theme. I feel like a lack of power is going to be a big theme in this. I say dodgy men, if not outright evil men. And by the sounds of it, probably some not very nice women either. Not nice adults, by the sounds of it. I'm expecting to maybe think it's a bit of a silly fun time, and then something absolutely horrific will happen. I think this book will be gross. I think it will be upsetting. And I think it will be scary. You know, I am concerned about it being pregnant teenagers. I think that might be a bit harrowing. I think that we're going to get some probably pretty bad birthing scenes. I'm hoping for the power of friendship to save the day. That's what I'm hoping for. Anyway, I've been talking for too long. I'm going to start reading this book tonight, and I will get back to you with my thoughts. Okay, it's been a long time since I filmed the last bit of this video. I've had a very, very busy few weeks, and I also got sick. Not only has it been a long time since I filmed the last bit of the video, it's been a long time since I actually finished the book. So this book is about a girl who gets pregnant and sent to a maternity house in Florida. She meets other girls there who are also pregnant, and they're all going through it. Whilst they're there, you know, they have to, you know, do as they're told. There's a woman in charge who's very strict. Yeah, they're watched and they're monitored, and that's what's going on. So Miss Wellwood, who owns the maternity house, names all the girls after flowers or, you know, plant-related names, and she names our protagonist Fern. Fern's having a really, really hard time because, you know, she's gotten pregnant by a boy that she really likes, and he's essentially disowned her. Her family are very upset with her, and that's why they've sent her to this place in Florida. They're not really speaking to her. She's really upset. She's about 15, I think, so It's all very scary because she's a child. She doesn't know anything about giving birth and nobody's answering any of her questions about it. And she turns to a woman in a traveling library because Fern is a big fan of books, and that's sort of where that takes off, and a lot of stuff happens. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very sad, the whole setup of the situation, that these children are abandoned in so many different ways by so many different people. There's nothing they can do because they're children. They can't get out of this situation because they don't have money, they don't have support. They just have to do as they're told and get through it so they can hopefully get back to a life that they were living before. You know, obviously that's very hard when you go through something big. It's hard to have what you had before. It's really distressing the way that the adults play their roles. You know, you've got some that prey on these girls, you've got some who just sort of shirk responsibility. It's sad. It's really sad. The whole setup is so sad. I was right about there being a lot regarding the power of friendship, and that was nice. These girls really only had each other to turn to, and I thought that was really nice to read. But the whole being a child and not really having adults on your side really sort of amps up the horror of this book. And a real, you know, a big thing that comes up in these Grady Hendrix books being that there's someone or some people who know what's going on, but they can't really express it to other people because other people just think that they're crazy. The real, like, isolating sort of horror going on. I think the fact that there really was a period of time where, before abortion was illegal, that young women were forced to go to these maternity houses, you know, give up their children. They didn't have a say in whether or not they got to keep their children, and they would just have them taken away from them and put up for adoption. I think that really, the fact that this is a real thing that happened in history makes this book a lot scarier. And I think the way that Grady Hendrix weaves in, you know, the supernatural elements is really interesting. I really like the way that he does that like these people are already in hard situations, so it makes it easy to be preyed on by supernatural forces. And I think that's a theme in all three of the books that I read. I know that sometimes people will talk about Grady Hendrix not really writing super strong characters. And just reflecting on that, I sort of think, I wonder how much personality comes through when a person is actively experiencing trauma. And I think you can go either way, because I guess the core of a person will be how they react to a situation like that. And then I guess that is a display of personality. But I sort of feel like, you know, these are children in this book going through a very stressful situation. I wonder how easy it is to show aspects of personality. But then again, I was thinking about it and I was like, well, what do they do in, you know, these times of stress and scary things going on? And I think that the biggest thing you see of their personalities is probably quite negative. So I guess it is a little bit hard to be like, oh, I really loved the character of such and such. I enjoyed reading about all the characters. I can't really say that I loved any of the characters, but I really felt for all the characters. Like, they are going through it and they're so young. So I guess that's why I'm of two minds about the whole characters thing coming through, because I think they really are just sort of, in a way, vessels for things to happen to them. And that's what is going on. Like, things keep happening to them and they just have to, you know, get through it as best as they can. I thought that Grady Hendrix was pretty tactful in his birth depictions. Like, I think one of my predictions was really harrowing birth scenes, and I thought the approach was good because there was a completely horror-full birth scene. There was a unbelievably clinical birth scene, which I actually found the scariest of all of them was the really clinical birth scene and the implications of the clinical birth scene, and then quite a human birth scene. And I thought that was really great, because I was, you know, mostly expecting it to just be disgusting and horrific, but I thought he was quite respectful in those multiple depictions, because obviously people have all sorts of different birth stories. I thought that was pretty tactful for like a horror book. I thought it was quite a slow burn of a book. I think I'd seen somebody maybe refer to it as more of a gothic sort of horror, and you know, I'm not normally into gothic books, because you know, it's somebody sort of wandering around and worrying for a long time. But I feel like the slowness of this book was maybe just a lot of setup, and definitely a lot of people sort of worrying a lot before other things happen. But I think they're very, very, very warranted in being worried about the situation that they're in. It being slower didn't necessarily bother me, and it did take me longer to get through, but that also didn't bother me because I kind of liked that I had this time to sort of sit with the book, that I felt like I needed to take breaks, that I needed to sit with what was happening. I appreciated that. I honestly probably could have taken more breaks when I was reading the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, but I was just so invested that I needed to know what was going to happen like right away. Because the story was slower, it was easier to be like, okay, that's enough, and then sit with it for a little while. I think this ended up taking me about 2 weeks to read. I think I must have gotten a bit busy during that period. But this was the longest of the 3 books. And I really, really enjoyed this book. I think I would recommend it for people who are interested in this period of history where maternity houses were a thing, and who obviously are okay with the fact that, you know, it's got to get supernatural, it's going to get, I don't even want to say silly or campy or anything, it's going to get supernatural essentially. And if you're not okay with the supernatural element entering the real world part, then you're not going to like it. If you're okay with the supernatural elements just adding to this really horrible history, then I think you could really like it. I gave this one 4.25 stars. Like, I really liked it. So annoyingly, I lent Horrorstör to my friend, so he's still got that, and apparently he liked it, but it didn't make him cry. That's alright though. I'll get that back soon, but yeah, sorry I don't have it. I don't have it to hold with these ones. This was a really fun experiment for me. I like Grady Hendrix books in my head are way campier than they actually are. Like, they're pretty horrific really, but I really like them, and I like his ideas, I like the settings. I think when I came into this, I was expecting friendship stories, I was expecting trauma bonding. I think that's fair to say. Those were the sort of things I was expecting more campiness, honestly, and it really brought up what I was thinking when I was thinking about my best friend's exorcism. I went into that book, that was the first Grady Hendrix I read, I went into that expecting it to be really campy, and it wasn't. Like, it was much more harrowing than I expected it to be. And I think it's just the way that people talk about Grady Hendrix, because I think they think of him as a campy author when he's not. So that's why I went into these with maybe expectations that they were going to be sillier than they were. But they weren't silly, they were quite serious. But they definitely have comedic elements. Like, I think especially the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, there are some really funny bits in there. Funnily enough, when I was reading this, I took it to the hairdresser with me when I was going to get my hair like cut and dyed. You know, I was telling my hairdresser about it and how I'd read these books, and she said that she thinks she might have seen the film for my best friend's exorcism, but she didn't really remember, which doesn't surprise me because I haven't heard very good things about that film. You know, I was telling her about this book, and I was telling her about how much I loved the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and all that, and then, you know, we moved on to different topics, and I asked her about any TV shows she'd been enjoying, and she told me that she was really looking forward to the final season of The Righteous Gemstones, which is a show about, like a comedy show about these people who own a mega church, and I'd never heard of it before, so I was really interested. And I went home and my partner and I started watching it, and we watched all 3 series really quickly, and now we're just waiting for next Wednesday it'll be for the final series to finish, and we'll watch all the series 4 as well. So it was a really good recommendation from her. Anyway, the point is that I was looking up Danny McBride because it's a Danny McBride show, but what I found is that Danny McBride might be adapting the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which is so exciting because I can't even tell you how much I've enjoyed The Righteous Gemstones, and I'm just like, I found that out and I'm like, ah, and like ran upstairs to tell my partner. Though I think it is a bit up in the air because I know that whilst, like right at the day that I finished this, Grady Hendrix posted a picture of this book and said it was getting an audiobook, and he said that he thought that that was probably going to be the closest thing to a movie that was going to happen. Yeah, I don't know what's happening with Danny McBride's Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires TV series, but I would really love to see that. Fingers crossed. I'd really love to see that. I think I can say that Grady Hendrix is up there with my favourite authors. Like, I really enjoyed these books that I've read, and I'm really excited to read more from him. So I think those are my final thoughts. I think that Grady Hendrix is really good. I think he writes really good books, and I really want to read the other books that he's written. This was a really fun experiment for me to just read the same author 3 books in a row. Yeah, so in the end, Horrorstör 4 stars, Witchcraft, Wayward Girls 4.25 stars, and the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires 4.5 stars. So that was very successful. Very happy with that. Thank you for watching. Bye!